American Comics. Rebirth of Iron Man, Mechanical Dominance System. Chapter 1. Xu Xiaobin opened his eyes. It was a dimly lit cave with a blinding daylight on the roof, a stove next to it, an anvil for striking iron, some disassembled round iron sheets, and some unknown machinery with a Stark on it. What is this place? I was obviously still drawing just now. Why did I suddenly end up in such a broken place? Could it be that I am asleep and dreaming? Xu Xiaobin wanted to sit up, and then he felt a dull pain in his chest. The breathing was painful, and when he touched his chest, Xu Xiaobin was stunned. He was a little skeptical about life. When I looked down, there was a circle of light on my chest, a disc that felt hard to the touch, and my clothes were lifted up, and a glowing disc contained an item that was set on my chest. Stretching out his hands and putting them in front of his eyes, these hands have large pores and vigorous body hair, and they are obviously not the delicate skin of the Asian race. Mo Sheng's place, Mo Sheng's body, and his chest were actually embedded with an iron tool. It is suspected that it has been modified. What has been experienced? Suddenly, many memories rushed to his mind, bizarre but extremely detailed, and there were too many memories pouring out at once, which made Xu Xiaobin's head sore and swollen. Crossed. Tony Stark, Tony in the later protagonists, is a billionaire and genius engineer. In 1970, he was born in a wealthy family in New York. At the age of 15, he entered the Massachusetts Institute of Technology (MIT) and graduated with the highest scores. At the age of 21, his father, Howard Stark, and mother, Maria Stark, died in a car accident. Tony inherited his father's Stark Industries. Engaged in the development and manufacture of weapons, in just a few years, Stark Industries has become the world's largest arms trader. Both parents are dead, hiss. But why am I here? Tony struggled to digest the memories. It turned out that this time it was the company's boss Abidia who instigated him to come to Afghan to inspect here, but he was kidnapped and imprisoned. Now it seems that this is not that simple. Obadiah was a partner in his father, who wanted to take power alone after his father's death. The kidnapping seemed to have been arranged by him. The purpose is to let himself die here, and he can have Stark Industries to himself. It's really calculating. If this crisis can be overcome, it can't be simply forgotten. Let's find a way to get out of danger. You have to go back to take revenge. Here, it's actually the universe of American comics. The original body should have been Karma, and it is very likely that it was a sudden death from overtime. Pity the wife and children in the previous life, how to live after losing the pillars of the pillar. I also pity this half-crippled body now, and I am trapped in the evil land, and I think I don't have many days to live. I was almost killed by a bomb made by my own company, and it was really a bad cycle of karma. Others are making money when they cross over, but they are earning their lives when they cross over. Alas. It's bad luck. Ding. Feeling the host's resentment, the mechanical domination system is about to bind. The host can use the system to upgrade mechanical items. Hearing the sound of the system's machinery, Tony only felt ecstasy. It's coming, the necessary artifact for the Traverser is finally here, and there will be a blessing if you don't die. It seems that there will be a place for me in this world in the future. Just listen to the name of this system to know how domineering it is, the mechanical master. It seems that it is the golden finger of the physical body and the weakness of the machine. In the future, a mechanical army will be formed to dominate everything. At that time, the purple sweet potato essence will be beaten all over the ground to find teeth. When Gila came, he had to kneel and beg for mercy. Tony, who had calmed down for a long time, began to study the system slowly. Tony touched the first-generation palladium reactor on his chest, which was a small nuclear reactor made by dismantling more than a dozen missiles and extracting palladium with his friend Dr. Ethan, and it took a lot of effort for the two of them. The voice of the system's machinery sounded in his head. This is an extremely rudimentary fusion reactor toy, whether it is upgraded or not. Tony thought to himself, this is a mechanical item. However, Tony was still a little speechless, and the two small reactors that worked hard were actually defined as toys by the system. Anyway, let's talk about upgrading. The golden finger given by the system, he is looking forward to what the reactor will be like after the upgrade. Tony said in his heart with anticipation, upgrade. The voice of the system machinery sounded. The upgrade is successful. It's a simple reactor toy with improved performance. A flash of light flashed, and the small reactor became exquisite, smaller in size, but higher in energy. Tony felt his whole body tremble, as if he had been overpowered. It's not just a reactor, it's more like a second heart of his own. The edges, which were originally rough and frayed, have become extremely smooth, and the delicate lines are like those made by the most precise CNC lathes. The coils that were originally wound by hand and a little loose have become neater and tighter, and the original palladium element reaction coils of different thicknesses have become uniform in thickness, and even with a micrometer cannot measure the slightest error. The reactor is more rationally structured and more efficient. The ion flow inside is more stable, and the light that fluctuated just now is now stable, and it looks like it is still in the light of the plasma flow has also changed from dim to intense. The plasma is denser, like a solid cloud of light. Tony felt a different level of energy. If it was a motorcycle, it was now a tank. The energy supply level has been increased by 100 million points. At least it's much more stable than before. In the original play, this small reactor can only provide energy to the iron armor for 15 minutes, and now after upgrading, there should be no such dilemma. Although it is still defined as a toy by the system. But Tony was in ecstasy. But as long as it can be upgraded, it turns out that the system is so powerful that it is better than the gods. Calming down, Tony continued to study the system, and the machinery that had been upgraded once could not be upgraded again. The more advanced the mechanic, the greater the boost. After upgrading, like the most primitive hammer, there is no major change after upgrading. Tony touched other things around him and found that artificially created ones could be upgraded, but natural stones couldn't. Roughly know the capabilities of the system. Tony's confidence skyrocketed. Has such a awesome golden finger, and the current embarrassment is just a small scene. He sat there thinking about what was going on. According to the original plot, this crisis will definitely be overcome, but the benefactor Dr. Ethan will die here. With Goldfinger, this ending should be able to change. After thinking about it for a while, Tony felt a little hungry and woke up in the morning to study the system and hadn't eaten breakfast yet. Pick up the breakfast on the workbench next to it. It was brought in by the kidnappers, although it can be eaten like pig food. But it can't be eaten. From this, it can be judged that from their point of view, they are a tool, and the tool is not starved to death, and if they want good treatment, they must be made for them. If there is value, they will improve their salary. If the missile can't be made, it will definitely be extinguished. Footsteps were heard in the cave nearby, and Tony saw Dr. Ethan, his savior, a middle-aged balding uncle in a shabby suit, with a gray beard, a pair of glasses, and a look full of vicissitudes. Originally, after Tony was kidnapped this time, he couldn't accept the fact that he had become a prisoner of war for a while, and he lost his way for a while, resisted, and abandoned himself, all of which were patiently enlightened by Dr. Ethan. Therefore, Tony is full of gratitude to him from the bottom of his heart. Is also determined to break the curse of the original drama this time and save Dr. Ethan. Juran wants to be reciprocated. Woke up. How does it feel? Dr. Ethan walked over with concern. It's okay, I can't die. Thank you. Tony felt his body getting stronger and smiled. It was definitely better than yesterday. The reactor was upgraded. I wouldn't be the same person I was yesterday. I just didn't know how to tell Dr. Ethan. Let's get the final assembly today, so get a good rest. We still have a lot to do. Quote. It's been 2 months since they were kidnapped, and at the beginning, Tony and Dr. Ethan came up with an escape plan. The first is to build a small nuclear reactor as an energy source, and the second is to use the iron sheet of missiles to make an iron armor, and then rely on the iron armor to eliminate all the kidnappers here and kill them from here, so as to complete the escape and be free. The first step of the reactor has been completed, and the second step is completed today, which is the final assembly stage of the iron armor, and the time is also pressing. The leader of the kidnappers asked to complete the assembly of the missile today. If it is not completed, the two will suffer. But after a night of fighting last night, the iron armor was finally ready, and Tony was also excited in his heart. Soon, you will be able to escape from this cave. The plan is in the people, the success is in the sky, and there is a system if the sky does not succeed. Dr. Ethan hoisted the armor with a small crane. Tony connected the iron arm, Rivet gun and cuirass to fix it. No way. The conditions here are simple. You can only use the simplest tool like rivets. Durability is not considered, now it can be used. Then there are the legs. The soles of the mecha feet are equipped with high-power jets, which can allow the iron armor to quickly escape from the battlefield, and there are also two small jet devices in the palms of the hands to adjust the direction of flight. It should have been a little more refined, but after Tony had the system, his mentality changed a little, and these defects could be solved by upgrading the system. Dr. Ethan silently brought the glove and helped Tony put it on. This glove can prevent his hand from being scratched by the mech. After all, the mech is too rough and has a lot of burrs inside. You also have to wear a neck guard around your neck to protect your neck. There is also a coat to protect the body from scratches. When Tony got into the iron armor, Dr. Ethan had to make one final adjustment to the weapon on his arm. Here's the flamethrower trigger, try it and feel the power. Dr. Ethan was distracted and made the final adjustments, striving to make Gotoni's operation more convenient and reduce failures on the battlefield, knowing that every mistake on the battlefield could cost a person's life. This is the last hope of two people, try to take into account every detail. Finally, it is the wearing activation loading system. In the original play, at this step, the kidnappers discovered the clues, which led to the sacrifice of Dr. Ethan. Not anymore. Tony looked at the busy man in front of him. Although he knew that it was not the right time, he still wanted to joke with him, grinned and said, "Lao Yi, I'll do a magic trick for you. You step back a bit." Dr. Ethan was stunned for a moment, feeling a little angry. What are you kidding? What kind of magic are you doing at this critical juncture? Seriously. Obviously. He didn't understand why Tony would do such an incident. It was a matter of life and death. Where was there any mind to play magic tricks, and it was important to escape. Tony put his hand on the iron armor, and the voice of the system sounded in his heart. This is a simple iron garbage, whether to upgrade or not. Well. Tony can't complain, the system is what you say, upgrade. Quote. The brilliance on the iron armor flashed, and the original welded ugly template has changed greatly, becoming smooth and flat, and the helmet with rough and simple air leaks on all sides has become tightly closed, and the original eye sockets are just two observation openings, but now they have become windshields. The material has been converted into tungsten titanium alloy, which is no longer something that the existing gunpowder weapons on the Earth can break, and the defense is bursting. The jet vent, which was originally designed on the soles of the hands and feet, has now been replaced by a thinner arc pulse cannon, and a cluster cannon has been added to the chest. The thruster power is perfectly adapted to the latest reactors, allowing it to fly faster and at higher altitudes. Mature mecha shape, smooth joints, strong protection, complex mechanical bite, exquisite structure. The iron armor is further lightweight, completely improved in shape, and completely fits the streamlined shape of the human body, making people feel the power of the explosion at a glance. All of them show that this is a great creation. With this armor, it was no problem to sweep through the rabble outside. Or it is possible to sweep the aircraft carriers of the moldy country. Dr. Ethan was stunned and sat on the ground, the sight in front of him that made him feel incredible. The iron armor that was still very simple just now, in a flash, has become such an advanced and beautiful mecha, and those who are engaged in scientific research know that the more beautiful things are, the more powerful they are, whether it is a weapon or a formula. Dr. Ethan's eyes lit up and he got up and reached out to touch the mech. His excited voice trembled. What is this? Tony was very proud when he saw Ethan's appearance, and said, magic, didn't I just say it? It's magic. Quote. Boom. On the gate outside, they set up a thunderbolt and exploded. The robbers have noticed that something is wrong and are gathering in this direction. The big war is about to break out. Tony put on his suit and said to Dr. Ethan, go to the back and hide. Leave the outside to me. Quote. The tragedy of the original show, Tony doesn't want to happen again. Dr. Ethan's sacrifice in the original play is Tony's biggest regret. This time, be sure to make up for it. The suit is activated, and the suit system is activated. The eyes on the helmet lit up, the chest cluster cannon lit up, and the palms and feet of the pulse cannon lit up. Warframes are ready to go. When Dr. Ethan saw such a powerful mecha, he couldn't believe that he had just built it himself. Now is not the time to sigh, quickly find a corner and hide. Tony paused and walked to the iron gate, where the two kidnappers who had just been killed had left two rifles behind. Tony picks one up and sends it back to Dr. Ethan, so that Ethan can protect himself when he goes out to fight. Before giving it to him, Tony gave him an upgrade, but before he had time to see the results of the upgrade, he shoved the gun into Dr. Ethan's hand and instructed, "You protect yourself." Quote. Hurry out, he wants to block the hole and prevent the enemy from entering. Dr. Ethan swallowed as he looked at the one-man tall, sci-fi rifle in his hand. Tony began to get into combat mode. Scan. A blue light flashed in front of the mech, revealing the terrain inside and outside the cave and the number and location of the enemies. More than a dozen kidnappers outside the cave were running towards this side. And Tony sneered, "Since you are looking for death, then I will fulfill you." After 2 months of abuse, Tony's heart is full of hatred. With a whoosh, the mecha had already left the cave and rushed outside. The speed was definitely at the level of sound, and there was a faint sonic boom. As soon as he got out of the hole, he saw enemies in all directions, and Tony rushed towards them as soon as he bent down, and before the enemy could react. He rushed as fast as he could. What kind of monster is that? Shoot, shoot. Don't let him rush over and stop him. The bandits fired wildly, their guns spewing out countless bullets. They were so frightened that they didn't dare to let go of the trigger with their fingers. For a while, the mecha was full of fire. Clanging, and the sound of bullets hitting the mecha kept ringing. After a while, one of the bandits' clips of bullets was fired, but the smoke cleared, and the mech was unscathed. Now it's my turn. Tony began to run, charged, and rushed directly into the pile of bandits. With a left punch, a kidnapper was hammered with a gun, spitting blood in midair. And with a right punch, a kidnapper was swept to the ground, his bones were shattered, and he couldn't see. That he was alive, Tony was like entering a no-man's land, and the bandits had no one to fight. Oh my god, it's so fast, the bullet can't hit him. No, the bullet hit, but it was blocked. We can't beat him. Quote. Drop the grenade. Where are the anti-tank rockets? Grab it and give him a shot. Quote. Missile, aim at him. Find an opportunity to him. The kidnappers finally reacted, and the firepower instantly upgraded to a notch. However, it was useless. The mecha is rampaging in this base of the Ten Rings gang, invincible, and everywhere it goes, people are turning on their backs. It was really a punch for a child. The child sometimes flew into the sky, sometimes fled to the ground, was beaten to the point that he was missing an arm and a broken leg, and he was unable to form an army. Tony had a lot of fun, and yes, he's playing. But for the kidnappers, it's hell. Boom, boom, Tony felt that the explosions were everywhere, but they didn't affect him. As soon as Tony raised his hand, he grabbed a flying rocket. The rocket had not exploded, and a large amount of flames were sprayed from the tail, and several mock rings could be seen. He grabbed the rocket and sprinted into a crowd. The boom rocket exploded, and the bandits, who had just been huddled in a heap, were instantly shattered. And the mecha is intact. Inspired by this, Tony rushed to the side of a bunch of rockets, picked up a rocket and threw it at a crowded place. The rocket parabola flew far away, and when he landed 10 meters above the enemy's head, Tony aimed at the rocket, activated the chest cluster gun, and fired. Within 10 meters of the boom rocket, no one survived. It's not much faster than Whack-A-Mole by 1. Refreshing. Concocted in accordance with the law. Boom, 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 boom. The 10 rings have already frightened their hearts. No matter who it is, the monster on the other side that can't be moved, can't be delayed, and is infinitely powerful is this desperate mentality. Retreat. Run, he's the devil. The kidnappers began to retreat, some dropping their guns and running, others shooting as they retreated. The kidnapper's mentality has collapsed. What else can he do? It is important to escape. It's okay for this kind of rabble to fight a tailwind war. Once the battle is scorching, they are the first to run away and retreat. Tony didn't want to let them go. I almost died at their hands before, but now I finally want to take revenge, and if I don't die completely, I will be sick in my heart. Cut the grass to remove the roots. Tony's speed is like a blast of the wind, and it's lightning fast. Not only is he fast on the ground, but he is also fast in the air. I saw him soar into the air, and after catching up with the fleeing people one by one, he punched and solved them one by one. Gradually, the base fell silent, and sporadic gunshots rang out, the sound of Tony settling the last remnants of the army. Tony landed at the mouth of the cave and looked back at the ruined base, full of severed limbs and flesh against the wall, and the tragic state was unbearable to look at. There was broken wood burning, and the air was filled with the smell of burning. The weapons and ammunition that had been piled up in the base had all been destroyed and detonated. Finally, the enemies were all wiped out, and the surroundings were completely silent. Tony glanced at the map and frowned. There was an enemy. The map shows 3 other people, one is himself, one is Dr. Ethan in the cave, and the other is supposed to be the leader of the kidnappers. I saw that the 3 standards representing people were all stationary. It seems that the leader is hiding. Tony entered the cave and saw Dr. Ethan hiding in a corner with the big gun, and poked his head out after hearing the mech's characteristic footsteps. Tony, how's it going? Dr. Ethan's tone was a little excited, a little expectant. As soon as Tony went out, he heard gunshots outside, and the explosions continued like firecrackers. The roaring outside gradually subsided, and by now, it was quiet outside, and no sound could be heard anymore. I guess Tony got rid of all the kidnappers. We succeeded. That's right, we succeeded, Lao Yi, we can go home. Tony lifted his face armor with tears in his eyes and smiled at Lao Yi. Go home. Dr. Ethan also became excited, jumped out and hugged the mech, slapped Tony's chest with both hands, and tears flowed uncontrollably. He was caught by the kidnappers before Tony, and he was scared here day and night, and he had had enough of it. It's so happy to be able to escape the cage today, and I want to go home every day, and I finally get what I want. Dr. Ethan was so excited that he covered his face with his hands and crouched on the ground and whimpered. The most painful ordeal of life is finally coming to an end. Tony was wearing a mech, and he couldn't comfort him, so he had to wait for Dr. Ethan to calm down. Tony's heart was full of relief at the moment, remembering Dr. Ethan's enlightenment to him during this time. This middle-aged man who pulled him out of the abyss at the lowest point in his life is very important to himself. The regret of the original drama is finally gone this time. Dr. Ethan eventually calmed down, and now he was in danger, not the time to feel sorry. And one last enemy. Tony and Dr. Ethan find the enemy's hiding place, which turns out to be a dry well. At first glance, he is a smart person, and he knows that if he drives away, he will definitely not be able to escape in the vast plains outside, and a car is too eye-catching. If Tony doesn't have a mech, it's better to say, the mecha can fly, how far can the car go in 10 minutes? It's much more hidden to find a dry well in the base and hide it. The base is so big, you can't search everywhere, right? He never expected that the mecha would have a scanning function. He still hasn't figured out how the other party's mecha came from. Tony lifted a scrapped car next to him and pressed it against the wellhead. If this bandit leader can come out, it means that he has a big life, and if he can't come out, then his life should be like this, and he will not live for more than 3 days. Tony and Dr. Ethan looked at each other and smiled. It's time to go home. It has been nearly 3 months since I came out to inspect and was kidnapped. The experience of these 3 months touched Tony's heart tremendously. In his previous life, he lived in a peaceful country, and in this life, he also lived in a peaceful country, and he had never seen any war. This kidnapping made him realize. No matter how rich you are, you will still be knocked out with one shot. When you are alone, others can bully you as much as they want. If it weren't for the armor on his body, would he have escaped today? I'm afraid that I was not directly shot by these bandits. They don't care if you're a tyrant or a genius. Therefore, only its own strength is truly powerful. Go home. The nearest mildew base is Kandahar Air Base south of Afghan. It is hundreds of kilometers in a straight line, and it takes you to cross the desert. In the original play, Tony flew half of it and fell into the desert. Now the mecha has been upgraded once, and it is much more advanced than the original iron armor, and it is no problem to fly hundreds of kilometers with a person in your arms. It's just that I'm afraid of accelerating too fast. Dr. Ethan can't stand it. The human body is unobstructed by supersonic speed, which is no different from Ling Kai. When Tony slowly landed at Kandahar Air Force Base with Dr. Ethan on his back, the whole base boiled. Woo woo woo, a mournful siren sounded at Kandahar Air Base. The base operations center is in chaos. UFOs were spotted, slowly. No response to wireless contact. The WIP helicopter has taken off. War room, this is WIP 1, I see an unknown object. It's a mecha, and there's a person on the mecha's back. Flying towards base. WIP 1 is locked, is it shot down? No, stop the attack. Alert. Lift the first level of alert, repeat, lift the first level of alert. In the end, he didn't attack, because the base didn't agree, and it was obvious that the mecha had no malicious intent, and the base speculated that if the mech were going to attack, he couldn't fly so slowly. And attack with people behind his back, unless he had in his head. Tony carried Dr. Ethan on his back and flew cautiously, firstly because he was not familiar with how to fly, and secondly, because he was afraid of hurting the person on his back. You can only increase the energy little by little. After taking off, accelerate little by little, and if the speed is too slow, you can't fly sideways, you can only fly vertically. Otherwise, Dr. Ethan on his back won't be able to catch it, and if he falls, he will fall into a pulp. Accompanied by a helicopter, Tony slowly landed at the airbase. Slowly reducing his energy, descending little by little, and after spending more than 10 minutes, Tony finally landed on both feet. Phew. With a sigh of relief, Tony put down Dr. Ethan, who was a little afraid of heights. Landed safely, fortunately there were no accidents. Tony breathed a sigh of relief at the same time, his whole body also relaxed, helping him feel the pain all over his body. He didn't feel it when he'd just flown up, and now he feels very tired. The two of them stood in place, and the boulder in their hearts finally fell, and they both felt like they were back in the world. This time in the hands of the kidnappers feels like purgatory. Immediately, a group of soldiers with real guns and ammunition came around. The soldier looked at the two nervously, standing or crouching, more than a dozen guns pointed at the two, and it didn't feel good to be pointed at the guns. Tony opened his visor with one hand, hugged Dr. Ethan, who was so excited that he wanted to kneel and kiss the ground, and smiled at the nervous GIs around him. Hey, how are you? The GIs looked at the murderous mecha with vigilant eyes. Soon everyone in the base was shocked. What kind of mecha is this? It looks very lethal. Quickly make them lay down their weapons and raise their hands. It's definitely not developed by the military department. You see that the mecha doesn't even have a number on it. Is this considered an invasion? Check if you're carrying weapons. Are those fools in the radar department eating shit? I found out so closely. The two were taken to a room at the base to rest. Identities were quickly verified, and the base didn't bother them, just interested in their mechs and guns. That's right, Dr. Ethan came back with a big gun, and he knew it was a good thing, so he wouldn't let it go. The news of Tony Stark's safe return spread like a wind across the earth, causing a major earthquake when all parties learned about it. The top brass of the military department was shocked when they received the notice that the richest man who had been kidnapped for 3 months had returned by himself, and he had also brought back a high-tech mecha. Casually rescued Dr. Ethan, who had been missing for many years. It also wiped out a local snake base in Afghan. Single-handedly, this is a human thing. The press was also shocked when they were notified. A UFO was spotted at Kandahar Air Base, suspected to be the richest man in the world, Tony Dark, who had been missing for 3 months. How did he spend these 3 months? Is it related to the kidnapper's daughter? The business community was also shocked when they got the news. Who did the richest man in the moldy country offend and why was he kidnapped? Did Tony make any PY deals with the kidnappers? What's next for Stark Industries? Pepper Pazzi, a housekeeper in a seaside villa in Malibu, California, held the documents to be processed in her arms, but she couldn't find the boss's signature, and the sun outside the window couldn't hide the worry in her heart. Alas, the boss hasn't heard from the boss yet, the company is about to be in chaos, and the top few shareholders are ready to move. What can I do? Pepper bit her lip, and began to regret it faintly in her heart. I knew that something would happen to him, so I should have obeyed him at that time, so as not to. An indifferent voice. Hello, Miss Pepper Potts, this is Afghan Kandahar Air Base, call to inform you, this afternoon, Tony Stark returned to the base by himself. He is currently in good condition. Tomorrow we will arrange a plane for him to go back. please arrange for people and vehicles to go to the airport. I won't be able to stand it if I don't come back. At this moment, on the top floor of Stark Daxia on the Upper East Side of New York City, the second shareholder Abidia also received the news. He stood in front of the full-screen floor-to-ceiling window, his face twisted, the blue tendons on his neck burst out, and he threw the pen in his hand on the table next to him, and yelled in his mouth, "Miscellaneous." Abidia hated in his heart. Why didn't this little die there? The Ten Rings gang is really a waste. Abidia clenched her fists and planned again. Since this can't work, let's think about it again. Quote. He is an ambitious person. The reason why he contacted the Ten Rings gang to kidnap Tony this time is because he is now the second shareholder of Stark Corporation, and the first shareholder is Tony. If Tony dies, he can completely control Stark Corporation, and he will be in power, and he can do whatever he wants when the time comes. Tony was his biggest stumbling block to unifying Stark. In his opinion, the Ten Rings gang is too wasteful, and Tony has already been caught by them, and he can still run away. Justin Hammer, president of Stark Corporation's nemesis, also had a gloomy face when he learned the news, and the newspaper in his hand turned to ashes as soon as he became angry. Tony was lying on the bed at the base, looking at Dr. Ethan, who was resting next to him, and smiled happily. Traveling through this American comic world, it seems that it is still the plot of Iron Man 1. At this time, the American comic world has not yet entered the era of super disasters, and everything has just begun. The Women's Federation has not yet begun to be formed. The Hulk has not been discovered when it is hidden. The captain of the mold country is still freezing in Antarctica. Thor is still in heaven and has not been exiled, and as for Thanos, he is still slaughtering the Andromeda Galaxy, and he has not been able to take care of the Milky Way. There are still 3 years before the Battle of New York happens. Everything is just right. I got the system after I was reborn, and I just used these 3 years to upgrade wildly. Mechs can be upgraded, weapons can be upgraded. Tony thought about those awesome mechs in the equal world. Like the sword in the stone armor, the Supreme Warlock armor, the Anti-Hulk armor, the Anti-Phoenix armor, and the Celestial Team armor. Tony suddenly felt that he must be able to do a lot in the future. The most important thing is that his benefactor, Dr. Ethan, was rescued by himself, and the regret of the original play was made up. Does anyone watch it? Unemployed middle-aged uncle begging for flowers online. Early the next morning, his friend Colonel Rhodes woke Tony up. In fact, he arrived last night, but he didn't find Tony in the first place, wanting him to rest better. Tony opened his eyes and saw that his friend Rhodes was sitting next to him, and his originally tense body suddenly relaxed. I'm glad to see you, Rod. Rod also sighed. The pampered playboy in front of him actually survived in the bandits' den for 3 months, and his current mental state is actually quite good. Next time, will you ride in a car with me? If they are attacked like this, they can still take care of each other, instead of being blind and having nowhere to do anything like now. Rod put his arm around Tony. At breakfast, Tony saw Dr. Ethan, who seemed to be well rested. Lao Yi, I'm going home soon. What are your plans? Would you like to go back and see your family first? Dr. Ethan took the milk in his hand and put it down gently. There were tears in his eyes, and the originally happy expression on his face gradually became a little sad. I don't have any family, they're all dead. Tony slightly regretted mentioning this, and he realized that Dr. Ethan had been living in pain, reached out and patted him on the shoulder, but did not speak. At this time, it is best to be sad with you silently. After a while, Dr. Ethan's voice gradually calmed down. Originally, I planned to fight those bandits yesterday. Even if I die, I can go to reunite with my family with peace of mind. Dr. Ethan's voice was a little happier as he said this. I didn't expect you to use magic. Tony quickly put his fingers in front of his mouth and made a silent motion. There are some things that can't be said here. Tony looked at this homeless benefactor, and his heart was also excited. If it weren't for him, he might have died at the hands of the kidnappers, and he was also moved by his true feelings when he thought of this. Lao Yi, I am your family. Dr. Ethan was stunned for a moment, and his emotions fluctuated, and the young man in front of him had never experienced any storms at first glance. The reason why I helped him was nothing more than to leave one more hope before he died, and the idea of being able to help one was one. But I didn't expect him to really do it, destroy the demon cave, and save himself. It's really a fixed number of quotes and pecs. I'll go to you in the future, arrange a job casually, and just starve to death. Anyway, there is nowhere to go, just go and see how far this kid can fly in the future, and that amazing magic will definitely shock the world one day. After breakfast, the base arranges a direct flight to the country. At LaGuardia Airport in New York, the plane landed smoothly. And Tony, Dr. Ethan, and Colonel Rhodes stepped off the plane together. Tony looked at the blue sky and white clouds, as well as the familiar buildings around him, took a deep breath, and finally came back. There was a medical van parked in front, several military vehicles, and in the middle was a commercial van, none other than the driver, Harpy Hogan, and his butler, Pepper Potts. Looked at the little Pepper with red eyes, tears but stubbornly held back not falling, and then a happy smile appeared on his face. A string in Tony's heart was plucked violently. Your eyes are red, and you are crying for your long-missing boss. Little Pepper said stiffly. These are tears of joy, I hate looking for a job. Tony died once, and now he is completely let go, and he doesn't bother to say anything, so he puts his arm around Pepper's thin waist and goes straight to his mouth. Kissed so much that Pepper pounded his fists, and his heart was like a deer. Then he took the initiative to put his arms around Tony's neck. Let's go of Pepper when she is red-eared. He turned his head and hugged Hogan, who was pretending to look elsewhere. Dr. Ethan, Colonel Rhodes was smiling beside him. Get in the car and go home. Now what Tony wants most is a moldy cheeseburger, and heel. The car drove straight to Stark Tower, where Tony was going to hold a press conference. As soon as Tony got out of the car, he met Abidia, the second shareholder of Stark Industries, who was also the mastermind behind the kidnapping. This insidious person, Tony is too lazy to pay attention to it now, he has more important things. Obadiah looked enthusiastic and stepped forward to open the door for Tony. Look, Tony, we were going to pick you up. Tony nodded indifferently and strode down the hall. Abidia's smile froze on her face, and she slowly withdrew her hands that wanted to hug Tony just now, and followed Tony into the hall, gritting her teeth, her eyes bursting with a cold light. Then he said loudly, look who's coming. Take the lead in applauding. A bunch of reporters in the hall applauded with Abidia. Seeing this scene, Abidia seemed to find the pleasure of commanding everyone again. Pepper sighed in the back, finally able to unload the burden. Tony strode up to the podium, looking at the group of eager reporters in front of him, and Abidia ready to interject. Calmed down, and spoke directly. I have seen a lot of things after being abducted for 3 months this time. I've seen young molds killed, and it's the weapons I built to defend them. I've also seen people do evil with the weapons I made, hurting people, even me as the maker. Tony touched his chest. He thought back to the bomb that had fallen next to him, and he still had shrapnel from the bomb in his body, which was produced by his own company. I haven't been able to say goodbye to my dad, but now I have some questions I want to ask him, what he thinks about the company. Did he ever struggle? Did he ever have doubts? This experience opened my eyes and I realized that I could do more for the world than just make a blast. Therefore, I am announcing the closure of Stark Industries' weapons production department, effective immediately, until I have decided on the future of the company and decided on its direction. Before the words fell, the reporter was in an uproar. It's worth it today, such exciting news. What could be more exciting news than the biggest arms dealer on Earth giving up his arms store? It should be written that Tony Stark went insane after the crucifixion, and he wanted to cut off his foundation with his own hands. Abidia jumped even more, trying to push Tony away. Abidia thought to himself that weapons are the most profitable piece of the company. If it closes, how can he make money, relying on those health products with weak margins? Look at what kind of you kid is talking about. Don't you throw out the biggest cake, give it to others. There is a saying in me about Mama T that I don't know whether to say it or not. You are so special that you don't feel distressed about selling ETN. Do you know how much effort it took to develop weapons to fool your old man? Say close now, shut down. How can you be worthy of your dead father, and how can you be worthy of my hard work for so many years? And the arms sales are still their own responsibility. Do you know how much oil and water is in it? If you don't have a weapon to sell, you let me drink the northwest wind. After all the hard work, I finally got the good situation now, how dare you destroy it directly? This must not be allowed to happen. Abidia immediately grabbed the microphone. Okay, now everyone is not worried about newspaper sales. What we should remember is that Tony is back, and he is back in good health and alive. Quote. We're going to have an internal discussion and we'll keep you back in. Although I can't wait to eat this in one bite, I still have to hurry up if it should be rounded, otherwise the newspaper will have no chance at all. He doesn't let people worry, and his turtle grandson doesn't make people worry. Why didn't the 10 rings help those wastes? Why didn't they kill him? It's really useless. Obadiah feels like her mouth is bitter today. I finally managed to deal with the excited reporters. Do you have a friend to watch? I couldn't open my eyes all night, and I begged for a flower before I fainted. Abidia angrily found Tony by the energy engine, his face changed from cold to calm, and said to Tony in a complaining tone, Tony, you can't do this, we are weapons manufacturers, and it is our job to sell weapons. Do you know what the stock will fall tomorrow? Quote. Of course Tony knows, it doesn't matter if the stock goes down or not, but I also know the good things you old has done. Tony looked at the second shareholder in front of him, who was full of jealousy, power lust, and ambition, and sneered in his heart. Next is the stage of peace of mind. If you don't get rid of the ambitious Obadiah, you will definitely be a chicken feather in the future. How do you get rid of me? Tony had already thought about it. Tony's voice was calm. Our job will only throw the world into chaos, we can do something else. Obadiah's voice gradually became excited. What else? Make a baby bottle. Quote. How good it is now, the world's largest arms supplier. It's like picking up money, you actually have to give up. Tony's voice remained calm. We can reconsider the arc reactor. Abidia was a little helpless, he thought Tony was a little whimsical, and laughed angrily. Come on, the arc reactor is just a gimmick, and it has no practical use at all. Tony looked at the tall arc reactor energy engine in front of him and grinned, I made it. Abidia didn't hear clearly and continued to output. At that time, this thing was just to gag the hippies, and as a scientific research project, this reactor didn't make any profit at all. And how long has this technology not broken through? 30 years, bar. Suddenly. He stumbled a little, thinking that he had misheard. What did you just say? Still calm, Tony repeated softly, I made it. Then. He pulled back his shirt, revealing the small palladium reactor on his chest. After realizing this, Obadiah glowed green, and in his eyes, Tony was a bodhisattva with a golden light. The reactor in the chest is the golden finger that turns a stone into gold. Energy is indeed more profitable than weapons, but why choose one or the other? And it's not a child, adults don't make a choice, they want it all. Weapons of infinite energy, it makes people happy to think about it. What price should be sold at the right price? This is really a good question, you have to think about it. Abidia's fingers caressed the small reactor engine and remained silent, but Tony saw ambition and greed in his eyes. This is a deeply hidden person who will do whatever it takes to achieve his ends. After a while, Abidia reacted, buttoned up Tony's clothes, and her voice was very kind, no longer aggressive. He even put his arm around Tony's shoulders and smiled. Okay, listen to me Tony, we're in this group, understand? As long as we work together, there's nothing we can't do, just like me and your father. Tony felt goosebumps rise on his body. The plan is still almost, and I continue to write the code. I also make a mecha with a reactor as an energy source, the kind that can fly. Sorry I didn't talk to you about it in advance. When Abidia heard this, she felt ecstatic, and her hair was about to explode. Oh, my little ancestor, don't pant so much next time you speak. It's scary, you know. Just now, I was thinking about how long it would take for the infinite energy weapon to be developed, and this little ancestor would not give the finished product immediately. Sure enough, the tiger father has no dogs, Lao Tzu is a hero, and the Stark family has to get it. How good the Stark family is, Lao Tzu has done his best for the company, and his son has also shined for the company, and he is really full of geniuses. What a good partner, anxious about what his companions are anxious about, and thinking about what his companions think. With such an excellent partner, it seems that the plan is still slow. Tony, the little guy, continued to keep it until his value was exhausted. Abidia smiled wrinkledly, patted Tony on the shoulder, and her voice was a little excited and trembling. Don't be sorry, I'm really relieved. You have grown to such a height, Stark will definitely develop extremely quickly in your hands. But I'll have to deal with it, and we'll have to play another trick now. We're going to be under a lot of pressure. You have to keep a low profile, I'm going to go to the front. Tony finally sent away the green-eyed Abidia, who had never found out that Abidia was such a person before, and perhaps the shock of ecstasy made him reveal some of his true colors. Tony knew that Abidia was behind the kidnapping, and that he had the ambition to replace himself as the true owner of Stark Industries. When Tony's father was alive, he was the first to beat Abidia. It was hard to survive until the old Stark died, the old master was deceased, and the new master was young. The second millennium finally has a chance to turn over. When Abidia does something to himself, Tony no longer believes in his uncle, whom he has known for 30 years. If you want to make people perish, you must first make them crazy. If you want to get rid of Abidia, you must first make him crazy. Give him a generation of ARC blueprints, and mecha design drawings, which is the first step to make him crazy. The first step of planning is complete, and then the second step of planning is carried out. The second step Tony envisioned was to deliver the fatal blow to Abidia when he was at his most confident. The plan continues. He's going to draw a set of blueprints for the Palladium reactor engine, as well as blueprints for the upgraded mech. Back at the seaside villa in Malibu, California, in the underground studio, Tony saw at a glance the mecha standing in the center of the studio. After the baptism of war a few days ago, the mecha was full of bullet marks, and there were traces of high temperature after the flames burned. This first-generation mecha is, after all, just the original metal, with no coating, and much worse protection. This mecha accompanied him to the battlefield for the first time, and to be honest, he really didn't want to dismantle it, so it would be nice to keep it here as a souvenir. But whether it's to complete the plan or upgrade the armor, it will eventually have to be dismantled. I'll reassemble it later. But there's one more important thing to do before tearing it down. It's all about upgrading all the useful items in the studio. Starting with the computer, and Jarvis is in it. Tony touched the computer with one hand, and the mechanical voice of the system sounded in his head. This is an extremely simple desktop computer, which contains a rudimentary AI system, whether to upgrade or not. Tony was a little looking forward to it. Upgrade. Quote. Bang! The light flashed on the computer. The original small 3-screen display became 6-screen large display. The small main chassis has become a 1-meter-high large main chassis. The CPU graphics card memory or something, it must have been upgraded. Jarvis must have also been promoted, so let's not test it and continue to upgrade. Then there was the 3D projector. Tony touched his hand, and the mechanical voice of the system sounded in his head. This is an extremely rudimentary 3D projection, whether it is upgraded. Upgrade. The light curtain of the 3D projector spreads the entire basement with a brush, and it is no longer a few square meters smaller, and the resolution is much higher. Then there are the 2 robotic arms that Jarvis usually uses. The original meticulous robotic arms, after Tony's upgrade, have become significantly thicker, and they are similar to industrial robotic arms, with fast response speed and high control accuracy. I don't know how much stronger than the original weaker look. There are also tools used in processing, such as lathes, milling machines, bench drills, electric welding machines, etc., all of which Tony has upgraded. Finally, all the upgrades are complete. At this time, Tony's studio has changed dramatically, full of upgraded items, at a glance, very sci-fi, as if coming to the future. Tony looked at his studio as if in a dream. Tony once again sighed at the power of the system, but he still felt a little lacking in his heart. He had just experimented, dismantling the upgraded items into parts, and installing them on another machine, which could not be upgraded. That is to say, as long as a certain machine contains parts that have been upgraded before, the machine cannot be upgraded. If you want to continue to upgrade, you can disassemble the upgraded machine and draw a drawing and make it again. If he wants to upgrade the mech again, he will have to do it all over again according to the new drawings. But this small flaw does not stop the light of the system at all. It's insanely strong that the system is still powerful. Jarvis, are you there? For you forever, sir. Can you help me scan the reactor engine structure on my chest? Okay, the scan is complete. Sir, I suggest you upgrade the studio power supply wire, it has just overheated. Suddenly, a 3D projection of an oversized engine appeared in front of him, startling Tony. Wow. Cruel. Quote. The upgraded Jarvis is so awesome. This running speed is much faster, the response speed of the old cow before, now it is the speed of the bullet train, which is not a level at all. Looking at the projection in front of him, Tony found a problem, it was too perfect. It's not in line with the plan. It's better to use the first generation. Tony operates on the projection, this removes too. Sir, in this case, the engine power will be reduced by 80%. Stability is reduced by 50%. That's right, this is a simplified version that will be used for testing. Finish. Save. The next step is to dismantle the mecha, but seeing that Jarvis has such a powerful scanning function, there should be no need to dismantle it. Jarvis, scan Mark 1, yes, it's the mech. Yes, sir, the scan is complete. Good mech, your design skills have become stronger again. Quote. After the upgrade, Jarvis has learned to make sycophants, and he used to only be hard. Tony's projection in front of him changed to a 3D image of the mecha and slowly rotated. It's so perfect, it's amazing, but it's not the same as the ideal mech you want. But this can be sent to Obadiah, so that he can optimize the first generation. Anyway, if he wants to dig a pit, he won't bother to think about it. Jarvis, send this mecha data, and the processed reactor engine data, to Obadiah. Done, sir. Phew. Good job, Jarvis. After the pit was dug and it was up to Obadiah to jump into the pit, Tony exhaled lightly and completed another small plan, feeling much more relaxed. Tony no longer worries about things outside, and concentrates on upgrading his mech, which is the most important weapon for his life in the future. You don't need to disassemble Mark 1, just keep it as a souvenir. Before, because the environment was too harsh, Mark Yi was in a hurry, and many ideas were not able to be realized, so let's redesign it. Even after system optimization, now Mark Yi is very bloated. Tony spun the projection and thought quietly. Tony spun the projection over and over again, thinking to himself what kind of mech he wanted after all. The shell was feasible in addition to defense, but it was too cumbersome, remove it. The fire system is too outdated, get rid of it. The balance system is also outdated and removed. The energy supply system is also poor, so remove it. The jetting device is still a bit rough, and the controller is a bit rubbish, remove and rework. Tony continued to ponder as he looked at the projection of skeletons and pulses left in front of him. There is no important battle in the early stage, it is small and lightweight, and it is definitely wanted. But the current conventional weapons must be defended. Defense improvement, it's definitely going to be flying. Needless to say, this must be just needed. Can't fly and be a fart mecha. Firepower, there is a pulse cannon, this can be added appropriately. Other auxiliary functions, such as scanning, computing, communication, etc., are not considered for now, and the framework is done step by step. The parts should be able to be separated, and replaced directly if they are broken. Each part plus a micro booster can be flown over and assembled by yourself. That's a good idea. Then each part has to be powered separately, and each part has a small arc engine added to it. Split-type armor, the original Mark and 1 armor piece are all one, it feels too painful to put on and take off, and it is much more convenient to use the combination type. Automatic opening and closing of the mask is integrated with the control system. In addition to the pulse power of the palms and feet, the back also has to add a few, so that it can fly fast. Chest cluster guns are retained, which are an important means of attack. You have to add a few small arms to your arms, and you have to add a few to your shoulders, like miniature missiles, laser weapons. Heat insulation, anti-freezing, and buffer systems have to be thought of. Remember the situation in the original drama where Mark II was frozen to death at high altitude, and it will be solved here at one time. There is also stealth, absorbing radar paint, otherwise it will definitely not be good to be stared at by the NSA every day. As for the infrared, there is no way, the heat of the vent is too high now, and it can't be optimized. You also have to add automatic cruise, you can sleep for a while during the flight, which is convenient. For a long time, Tony looked at the slowly rotating mecha in the projection, and the mecha no longer had its previous bloated appearance, showing a high-tech futuristic feeling. The design of the armor has sleek lines, which is both resolute and stylish. The design of the helmet is simple and elegant, with well-defined shoulder and chest armor. Muscular lines and a strong body. The leg armor is strong and powerful, and the design is simple and powerful. The mecha is very technological and domineering. Tony is extremely satisfied. This is the mecha in his mind. And he is looking forward to what kind of mecha it will be after it is made and upgraded with the system. Finally finished, and Tony stood up and stretched his aching body. I didn't feel it when I was busy, but when I stopped, I realized that something was wrong with my whole body. Jarvis, let's start production, and then assemble it automatically. Estimated completion time, 5 hours. Sir, you haven't taken a break for 36 hours, please take a break. Tony shook his slightly swollen head. You're right, I'm going to sleep. I hope the mech will be installed when I wake up. Just as he was about to rest, he suddenly remembered something. By the way, how is the progress of the prototype mecha over there in Obadiah? 80% of the work has been completed, and it is expected to be completely completed tomorrow night. Tony smiled slightly, relieved. It's just right, I went to rest dear. Quote. When Tony woke up, he came to the studio in good spirits and took a look, only to see a silver mecha standing in the middle of the field, exactly the same effect as his own design. Tony came to him excitedly, looked back and forth, and was satisfied. Jarvis, unfold the mech. Tony was a little impatient. As you wish. With a few clicks, the mech unfolds like a chrysalis shell, revealing the intricate machinery and sensors within. Tony stuck it on, his eyes went dark, and in the click, he only felt that his body was tightly wrapped by the mecha. The mech then activates and the panel lights up. Tony looked at the sci-fi interface in front of him and calmed down a little. Start the front end. Initiated. There was a flash of data on the panel. Check the status of the mech. All well. The sound of dripping sounds everywhere in the mecha, and the inspection passes. Load the control system. Loading complete. Real-time mecha data appears on the panel. Check the control panel. As you wish. The mecha blades shook for a while, and the built-in various devices telescopic and self-tested. Testing complete, ready to restart. Well, it's pitch black again, and the panel lights up again in less than a second, and the operation just now is equivalent to installing a system on the computer. For the first time consuming point, the later mecha is ready to use, which is convenient and fast. Tony stepped back, held down the mecha with his hand, and listened to the mechanical voice that appeared in his head. This is a simple mecha toy, whether to upgrade or not. Tony thought the system was sounding great. Tony was full of hope. Upgrade. Quote. A flash of light flashed, and the mecha changed dramatically. The previous shells made of stainless steel have been turned into titanium alloys. The original silver-white shell has turned into red and yellow, like a battle armor covered in gold, which is quite atmospheric. The exterior lines are smoother, and the nail slits are tighter, making it appear strong and precise. The screw holes on the mecha have all disappeared. And the biggest change is the chest, which was originally divided into several plates, but now it is tightly linked, as if it is a whole piece. And the conspicuous armor on both shoulders is also close to the mecha, smooth and flat. The caliber of the chest cluster gun has also become much smaller, but it certainly will not be less powerful. The shells of the miniature missile launchers, which were originally raised on the arms, are now only smooth and slightly raised, and if you don't look closely, you will think that they do not exist. The same is true for the legs, where the original blocky lines are now supple and natural. The entire mecha is as if it was carved out of a single piece of metal, rather than the original one. The whole mecha display is very sharp, giving people a sense of high mobility and alertness, a perfect combination of technology and strength. The more beautiful the machine, the more advanced it is. Tony knows this very well. Jarvis, rescan the mech. Tony wanted to figure out what was different about the mech after it was upgraded. The scan is complete, the work is extremely perfect. Sir, I don't understand, the mecha is very different from my previous scan data. An unknown event has just happened, and the mecha seems to have been upgraded, and all the data has been greatly improved. Jarvis' CPU is burning out. Tony flipped the projection, extremely satisfied. It was time to fly out and try it. Jarvis, deploy the mech, check the weather and air traffic control, and listen to ground control. Tony looked at the flight map in front of him, as well as the topographical map, and was as excited as the groom who entered the cave room. Ready. 3, 2, 1. Quote. Boom. The pulse injector started, and Jarvis's voice sounded. Take off. The output power has been adjusted to 2.51%. The flight path has been planned. Tony looked at the data on the panel and the flight trajectory prompt, and had to sigh that after the mecha was upgraded by the system, it was really too much smart. At least it won't be like in the original play, relying on yourself to test the power parameters used during takeoff, and being bruised and swollen. Now it's brainwave control, you can fly as you want, and you can fly freely. Power upgrade, 5%, 8%, 12%, 17%, 23%. The outside world is vast, no longer limited by the venue, and the speed of the mecha has soared. Tony felt what was fluid, what was free, and what was uninhibited. Feeling a thrill that was even more refreshing than a speeding car, Tony felt his adrenaline rush secreting, his heart raced, and he had trouble breathing. I can fly, ha ha ha. Tony was laughing and rolling wildly. At this time, he is a fish in the sea and a bird in the air. He seemed to be free from the shackles of the human body, and his soul soared freely in the sky. Fly as much as you want, soar into the sky, tumble and dive, accelerate to the limit, make sharp turns, and cobra maneuver. When Tony was accelerating at the limit, he even felt the sonic boom, and the moment the sonic boom was generated, he felt a force tearing the mecha left and right. Sharp turns, the greater the speed, the greater the overload, and now the maximum overload of the pilot is 10 g, which is 10 gravity. When fighters fight in the air, some actions are not that the fighter can't do it, but that the person who drives the plane can't do it, and the overload can't exceed 10 g all the time. Tony had just made a sharp turn and definitely crossed the 10 g, but he didn't have any negative reaction at all except for a little dizziness. The mecha after the system upgrade is so awesome. Tony swept across the sea, stirring up thousands of waves that pierced through the clouds and formed a large hole. Flying is the desire of human genes. When I was a child, everyone fantasized that they could fly. And it was definitely not the kind of sitting in an airplane, which only made people feel itchy in their boots and take a bullet train flying in the sky. Instead, like a bird, he flew from one end of the mountain to the other side of the mountain, or from the window to the window of the opposite building, and flew to the other side of the girl's room that had been secretly thinking for a long time. This is what man really desires. Being able to fly, you can achieve a lot of things that you didn't dare to think of before. Will fly, will reduce the difficulty of many things. Wherever the eye can see, it is instantaneous. That satisfaction that comes from the depths of the soul. It's fascinating. Finally, Tony stopped, hovering at an altitude of 10,000 meters, looking at the ground under his feet. Like a spider's web, the lights were intertwined. He had seen the night scene at high altitude in a plane before, but it was completely devoid of the free and pleasing beauty of the present. At this moment, Tony felt like a god. Tony had never felt so stirred as he was today. It took a moment for Tony to feel his heart beat like a drum, and his whole body was soaking wet. Stopping there, Tony began to retract his increasingly wild heart, afraid that he would go crazy and forget about business. Enough playing, it's time to plan the next step. Tony can't wait. Abidia's existence is like a fish in the throat, and for those who have plotted against him, he must fight back. Jarvis, check the progress of the mech development on Obadiah's side. They're done, and Mr. Abidia is testing. Exactly. Give him a call. Quote. The phone is being connected. Hi Tony, I wish you could come and see my prototype, definitely not as conservative as you. In the 16th district of the Stark building, Abidia's voice was full of excitement, or ambition. I feel like I can pull the world back on track. Obviously, he felt that he had mastered the world again and could do something. Obi, I found something interesting on the ghost drive of your computer. Tony's tone was calm. What did you find? Abidia's voice calmed down, and he hoped that the worst thing would not happen. A kidnapping video. Tony's tone was still calm, as if he was talking about a trivial matter that didn't matter. There's no need to say anything, just let him think for himself, and he'll make up for the outcome of the matter himself. But in Abidia's ears, it was like a thunderclap. He knew that what he had done was exposed. This is a video taken by the kidnappers about the kidnappers repenting of the price increase. Tony knows all the things he used to do. For example, he found the Shiji gang to kidnap him and wanted to kill him. The things about smuggling weapons in private, and some things about setting up Tony and trying to control the company by himself. All of which he knew. Ever since Tony came back, he knew there would be such a day, but he didn't expect it to come so quickly. Abidia was silent, a little flustered and nervous at this moment. I'm thinking about how to reply. He thought, after so many years of diligent efforts. He thought, after so many years of conscientious reclamation. If it weren't for himself, Stark Industries would have closed down a long time ago. Now this lazy playboy is flipping through his privacy. After so many years of hard work, it's like feeding a dog. Dogs know who is good to them, and it will wag its tail. How does Tony repay himself? I'm actually peeking at my privacy. 30 years of nurturing kindness, but there is not even a basic trust. So Abidia's panic and shame turned into anger, an anger that was exposed. Abidia's voice was hoarse. Tony, you broke my heart. Quote. In the 16th area of the Stark building, Abidia touched the tall mecha in front of him, which was the prototype mecha Iron Overlord that he changed according to the magic of the Mark generation, 10 meters high, and the huge mecha was full of oppression. His eyes were full of anger at the moment. Holding the mobile phone in his hand, his voice gradually became colder. For 30 years, I have been holding you. I have established this company from scratch, and now it is the first in the world. Quote. Do you know what the world's #1 arms dealer is? Do you know how hard it is to do that? You don't know anything, you're just going to spend your days drinking. You're just immersed in your own world all day. Abidia slapped the mecha thigh, feeling depressed, feeling that he had raised Tony with hard work, but now Tony was going to do it with him. Such an unfilial son, he would be angry with his old father. I want to continue to lead the company to glory and keep the power in our hands. Don't think anything of it gets in my way, and you don't want to. Obadiah opened the mech and put on his upper body. He was now completely free, and he spoke more and more unscrupulously. He sneered, and there was a sense of abuse in his heart that rushed straight to the heavenly spirit guy. When I was looking for someone to kill you, I was still worried that I had mistakenly killed a goose that could lay golden eggs. But you see, that's fate, you survived. Come back, and you'll give you the last 2 golden eggs. Abidia activated the mech, his eyes growing feverish. What a masterpiece. A new generation of weapons that will be your legacy. You're going to die on your own invention. Abidia controls the Iron Overlord, and the iron fist swings above his head, bang, and the ceiling cracks in response. The Iron Overlord grabbed the edge of the big hole with both hands and climbed up. The basement was too narrow to barely move. The Iron Overlord squeezed through the shattered concrete floor and crawled out of the ground, his eyes flashing red on his mecha helmet, like a demon crawling out of hell. Abidia can't wait. Instead of sitting still, it's better to take the initiative and take out Tony's little first, and then there will be nothing left. Congress doesn't care who is the owner of Stark Industries, and it doesn't matter if you're guilty or not, as long as they can get the tax, as long as they have money, everything is not a problem. Today is his final fight with Tony, and one of the two will die. There is no escaping it. Standing in front of Stark's building, looking up at the starry sky, Abidia thought a lot and made up her mind. Today is the day when he turns over, and he will forever take control of Stark Industries, the arms hegemon. The world will get back on track. Abidia is yearning for a seaside villa in Malibu, California, and it is a little far from the Stark Tower to the seaside villa in Malibu, California, a little far, a full 4,000 kilometers. But it doesn't matter, the Iron Overlord can also fly. Inherited from the advantages of Mark I, the main function of the mecha is to fly. Although he flew over to take some time, the night was long, enough to accomplish some of the things he wanted to do. Obadiah suddenly heard a snort sound, like the sound of an aerial bomb cutting through the air. And before he could react, a heavy object fell in front of him, and the sound of boom sounded like an explosion, and the dust flew in front of him, and the cement gravel flew like a bullet, hitting the Iron Overlord, crackling. The Iron Overlord stood still. When the smoke cleared, I saw a small mecha standing in front. Although exquisite, like a woman, what can be a deterrent? It's better to be an overlord, big and thick as a man's favorite. Abidia scoffed. Obi, are you looking for me? The small mecha mask opened, but it wasn't Tony. Tony looked at the stupid and thick Iron Overlord in front of him, and thought to himself, sure enough, everyone's aesthetics are different. Awesome, you've upgraded your armor, and I've upgraded myself. Abidia was a little surprised, and was about to go to Tony, but he sent it to the door himself. Isn't this God taking care of him? Looking at Tony's mecha, like a thin tights, a playboy is a playboy, thinking about how to play handsome all day long, is. The mecha used to pick up girls. Let me teach you a lesson today. This is the last time. It hurts a little, you bear with it. Abidia felt she had won the game. Tony also thinks so. After the mecha is upgraded, this is the first actual combat, and he believes in the capabilities of the system. Abidia got excited, strode forward, and smashed Tony with a fierce punch. The momentum sank, as if he was going to smash the opponent to death with a heavy punch. Tony also wanted to try the performance of the mecha, and also punched over, and the two punches collided. Boom. Bang. Bang. Boom. Tony only felt that his eyes were dark. The mecha had been smashed by the Iron Overlord with a punch, and the mecha had sparked all the way through the fence, street signs, iron car boxes, and the concrete floor of the road. Careless. Tony didn't expect it just now. The strength is the same, but the quality is not the same. The height of the Iron Overlord is 10 meters, and his weight is at least 100 times that of his current mecha. The Iron Overlord took 2 steps back at most, but he could only fly out because he was too light. Since you can't fight the enemy, you can only outwit it. Tony has an attack strategy in mind. Standing up, he hurriedly inspected the mecha and found that it had not been damaged at all, except for the scratched surface coating. The system is still so awesome. Abidia also stood firm, looking at the mecha's hands, extremely excited. This is the feeling of power. I like your creativity, Tony. Regardless of the traffic accidents on the road due to sudden braking, Tony's soles of his feet pulsed and his body flew up and rushed towards the Iron Overlord. The speed became faster and faster, and the two armors slammed into each other, making a deafening loud sound, like an invincible Hot Wheels, tumbling and wrestling, stirring up waves of earth-shattering chi. The surrounding scenery was swallowed up by this destructive force, and the fragmented debris was splashed everywhere, and the destructive power was staggering. The cacophony of grinding between the metals echoed over the battlefield, each thump sending a devastating shockwave. In fact, the strength of the two mecha is about the same. Tony's mecha is advanced, but the size is small, but Abidia's model is large, and the arc reactor is magnified by 3 times, and the output power is naturally much larger. Neck and neck. They are like 2 angry dragons entangled with each other. In fact, neither of them is very good at attacking. They were both pampered ordinary people before, and the attack and defense of the two are full of loopholes, and the reason why they are so powerful is only because the mecha is too powerful. During the scuffle, the Iron Overlord grabbed Mark III's feet and threw him to the ground with a loud bang before Tony could react. Seeing that it was working, Abidia threw hard left and right and smashed a few more times. Tony subconsciously kicked it away. A donkey rolls over the distance, then the pulse jet kicks in and flies into the sky. At the same time, he came to his senses and secretly scolded himself for being a pig. Attacking the enemy's strengths with their own shortcomings is not what a pig is. Tony was dazed just now, and he actually fought with the Iron Overlord at close range, and now he came to his senses and quickly pulled away. Perform long-range attacks. Tony takes to the skies and hovers. Miniature missile preparation. In the panel, Tony sets the target. Fire. Boom. 5 miniature missiles flew towards the Iron Overlord at great speed, drawing countless astonishing arcs in the air. Abidia hurriedly opened his weapon and fired back, and the Iron Overlord raised his arms, and the Gatling barrel gun on his arm began to activate, and the da-da-da began to shoot before it could be aimed. I saw a line of fire spread forward from the feet of the Iron Overlord, pointing directly at Mark III in the air. Boom boom. Micro-missiles were all blown up, and the corners of Abidia's mouth sneered. Iron Overlord, he has not only upgraded a little bit, and the automatic targeting system is not vegetarian. Then the bullet line caught up with Mark San and hit it hard. Bell bell, the mecha sparks were everywhere, and Mark San was pushed back by the bullet kinetic energy, and he couldn't stop. The mecha alarm sounded. The mecha is detected to be attacked, please pay attention to parry and avoid. Damage 0.1%, 0.2%, 0.3%. Tony was still a little panicked at first, the missile could not be effective, and he was attacked by a bullet again, the bullet was too fast to dodge. But when he saw this loss of speed, he immediately relieved himself, stood there and shot him for 10 minutes, and only suffered 10% damage. Minor issues. He checked the weapon of the mecha, and was suddenly a little speechless, long-range attack, only micro-missiles. There are also other weapons. The arc pulse cannon, which uses shockwaves to hurt people, which is considered a melee weapon, and it is powerless to deal with the Iron Overlord with thick mechas. Chest cluster cannon, a medium-range functional weapon, attacks with a high-energy beam or plasma beam, and is an energy-type weapon, but it is still powerless against the Iron Overlord. Decoy bombs, which are protective weapons, are even less useful. Mini-missiles, which have just been tried, also do not work. At first, he thought that after the Mark II mecha was upgraded to Mark III by the system, he could beat the Iron Overlord, but he never expected Abidia to be so frustrated and enlarge the mecha to such a size. In the original play, the Iron Overlord was only 5 meters, and the Iron Overlord in front of him was 10 meters tall and 3 stories high. Tony remembered Iron Man's solution to the Iron Overlord in the original play, and thought about it, so it could only be so. Immediately moving at high speed, he wants to provoke Abidia, and he wants to take the Iron Overlord into the air so that he can have a chance. Abidia saw that Tony was no longer attacking, but he didn't want to let him go, and he was very hard to modify the Iron Overlord. Gatling always pointed at Tony, and the trajectory followed closely behind. And when he saw that Tony was too nimble for the bullet to hit at all, he switched to the laser beam. Aim, fire. Silently, a large number of sparks came out of the air of Mark III, but it was useless, Mark III was still flying in the sky, like a nasty fly. Tony suddenly hovered again, the cluster cannon in his chest was aimed, fired. Bang! The Iron Overlord shook a little, but unscathed. Abidia grinned and mocked, hey, don't be like A. Come over and let's fight like men. You think I'm as stupid as you are. Tony taunted back. Abidia felt insulted, the weapon in his hand became sharper and sharper, bullets were splashed out like money, and 6 consecutive missiles in his left hand began to be fired, and the laser beam also came from time to time. Tony was nimble like a monkey, the bullet missed, the missiles all dodged, only the laser beam could hit him. Abidia was angry, ready to magnify the move, the weapon case on his shoulder also cracked, and an anti-tank rocket was revealed. With a thud, he sped towards Tony. As soon as Tony turned around, the rocket narrowly passed by, and Tony even saw the Stark printed on the rocket's body. It's a weapon made by himself again, Tony smiled bitterly. He took the bullet and rushed towards Abidia, the anti-tank rocket behind him, turned a big corner, and also chased behind Tony. In less than a few seconds, when Tony passed by Abidia, he kicked the Iron Overlord in the face, and flew in a different direction after being forced. Abidia finally understood, and didn't care about Tony, and the Gatling in his hand aimed at the anti-tank rocket that followed. He was in the path of the rocket, and if he didn't deal with it, he would be attacked by the rocket he launched. The boom rocket exploded 10 meters away from him, such a close distance, it can be regarded as a close-to-face attack, but the Iron Overlord was not damaged at all. Abidia was shocked and dizzy. And then he rushed straight to the spirit cover in anger, his eyes were red. Why? This little insect still resists, he can't die quietly, isn't it good to be killed by himself honestly? It's just a pain, what a simple thing. It has to be like this. My dream of unifying the world was blocked by this little bug. What it's like to be attacked by your own weapon, tell me about it and make me happy. Because I've encountered it too. Tony continued to flirt in the air. Die, die. Abidia gritted his teeth, only to feel that the world had turned red. He didn't want to slowly consume Tony like this, he wanted to screw his head off with his own hands. The soles of the Iron Overlord feet pulsed out, producing a huge amount of smoke and dust, which spread all around, and the Iron Overlord demonic suffocating and heart-pounding sensation enveloped the entire battlefield. Mark III's pulse wave is clean and transparent, and the Iron Overlord pulse wave is full of smoke and dust. I think it's because Mark III has a light weight and a small amount of power, so it's clean. The Iron Overlord is heavy, and if you want to fly, the power of the pulse energy beam must be opened to the maximum, and now it is running at full power when it takes off. The Iron Overlord slowly rose into the air and flew towards Tony, the weapon in his hand never stopping. Tony flew all over the sky, slowly flying towards the sky. The mecha that was upgraded by the system, in fact, was much faster than the Iron Overlord, but he always surrounded the Iron Overlord and did not leave his shooting range. Abidia was already so angry with Tony that he was demented, and what he didn't think about at this time was that in the air, the Iron Overlord was moving slowly, and it was impossible to catch the nimble Tony. Gradually, the Iron Overlord's speed increased, and the speed became faster and faster, and the bullets could no longer hit Tony, so he stopped Gatling. Single-mindedly shooting Tony with only a laser beam. Every few seconds, a puff of sparks flashed from Mark Sand's body. All the way up, like fireworks soaring into the sky. Tony kept flying up with the Iron Overlord, and soon reached a height of 5 kilometers. Tony deliberately flew very slowly, just 5 meters above Obadiah. And the 3 Max who had been upgraded by the system could control this distance very well. 5 meters, the Iron Overlord could touch it with his fingers straight, but it was almost a loss if he wanted to catch it. Abidia was so angry that she couldn't catch this little even though she was right in front of her. Accelerate, accelerate with all your might. Obadiah's teeth were about to be crushed, but it was always a little bit closer, and the lever was almost broken by him. Looking at the ice gradually appearing on the mecha, he faintly felt that something was wrong in his heart, but he didn't want to let go of the absolutely good opportunity in front of him. Just a little bit. Suddenly, the panel in front of me flickered a few times, and it went completely black. Abidia was shocked. He didn't know that the fatal flaw of the arc reactor was that when the altitude exceeded 5,000 meters, it would automatically turn off. And 5,000 meters would fall freely, and it would only take 32 seconds to fall to the ground. If he doesn't restart the mech in 32 seconds, he will fall into a puddle of flesh. It takes 20 seconds for the arc reactor to restart, so Tony only has 20 seconds. But enough. Tony deceived the Iron Overlord the moment it crashed. At a time when both are stalling and in free fall. Tony grabbed the Iron Overlord chest mech with his left hand, and smashed it hard into the Iron Overlord chest with his right hand. Bang! Tony slammed his punch hard into the Iron Overlord chest, and the ice on Iron Overlord chest was smashed and splashed in all directions. Bang! The glass bezel on the Iron Overlord chest cracked. Bang! The rift is getting deeper and bigger. Bang! The crack runs through the entire baffle, and I have to say that this baffle is really strong. Bang! The glass baffle shattered with a thud, and Tony reached in and pulled out the arc reactor, which had been magnified by Abidia. And the arc reactor flashed and was about to start, as if it was dying. Tony's fingers crushed it with a single force, and the engine fragments flew in all directions in the strong wind, shining like a human soul. Plan 2, done. Phew. Although things were a little different from the plan, there were no big surprises. Originally, Tony thought that Abidia wanted to build a mecha, and it would be almost as good as the original show to make a mecha of 4 or 5 meters. But he still underestimated Abidia's ambitions. Maybe he lacked a sense of security, and the mecha he built was exceptionally strong. The baffle glass on the Iron Overlord chest fully withstood Mark III or 5 punches. You must know that Mark III is still an upgraded mecha. Without a system upgrade, it would have been impossible to break this sturdy baffle with a fist. It's slow to say, but it only takes 10 seconds to fall here, and the drop height is 500 meters. Abidia is in the Iron Overlord, trying to operate, but everything is in vain, and the mecha does not react at all. The sudden change made him a little flustered. Then he felt weightlessness, the instinctive reaction of the human body, always trying to grab something under weightlessness. But he couldn't catch anything. He was locked in this claustrophobic small space. If the mecha couldn't start, he didn't need Tony to give him the final blow. From a height of 5,000 meters, he was also dead. 5,000 meters, and it took 32 seconds to fall freely. He still has 32 seconds to save himself. Abidia feels his hands tremble a little, his chest is tight, he is short of breath, he is frantically slapping the inside of the mech, he is shouting, shouting mech, shouting Tony, shouting God, he is struggling, the mecha panel keeps flashing, but it just can't start. He didn't know what caused the mecha to get out of control. It may be Tony's ghost, or it may be God's ghost. He feels that at this moment, the whole world has abandoned him. All the reasons are unknown. However, at this time, there was a crashing sound from outside the mecha. And the thump was stronger than the other, and Abidia felt that the sound was like her own heartbeat. And it was also like the bell of death, ringing the countdown to death one by one. He began to panic, he began to be afraid, he tried to restart the mecha in a panic, and also tried to manually open the mecha mask, but he couldn't push it away, the mecha seemed to be welded to death. Finally, there was a big bang at the last bang, there was a shattering sound, and he finally understood that it was Tony who smashed the chest baffle of the Iron Overlord. He must have taken the arc reactor. He took his hope. He knew he was defeated. Defeat at the last moment of imminent success. The whole world is quiet, but it is as quiet as before death, which is even more terrifying. The sound of whirring wind began to appear outside the mecha, which was the sound of the mecha falling at a rapid speed and cutting through the air. At this time, he finally pushed the mecha away, and the icy wind blew in, raging inside the mecha, blowing people unable to open their eyes. And he saw the man on his head that made him hate to the bone, Tony. In his eyes, this gentleman who hindered him from reaching the top. The person he looked down on yesterday, is now hovering in the air, like an invincible emperor. The white glowing glasses on Mark's mask, which were cold and merciless, were falling rapidly. He knew that he would be shattered in 20 seconds, and he opened his mouth to say something, but he was gagged by the wind. Whispering and begging him for help. Forget it, Tony can't make a move. Angry and insulting him. There's no need, they're all dying, what can I do after scolding? Repentance to God. If you have bloody hands, maybe God will dislike it. Give up, no matter how much you struggle, it's useless. His gaze remained on Tony, and as the distance grew, Tony's figure grew smaller and smaller, eventually disappearing into the sea of endless starlight. He thought back to the past 30 years, remembered today's crazy moves. What was his goal at the beginning, was to lead Stark to become bigger and stronger. Since when did he start to deviate from the goal, is to watch Tony not learn and know, start playing cars, play computers. Just don't engage in weapons, weapons are the main business of Stark. Seeing that he was anxious in his eyes, he had the idea of replacing Tony as the director of the company at this time. How to replace Tony, then the only way to let Tony die. As a result, both times failed. It's all for Stark, obviously with good intentions, but no one understands. There may be remorse in the heart, or there may be self-blame, but it will not help. Abidia's heart was filled with endless confusion and doubts at the moment. He didn't know why he had failed, or whether he had made the right choice before. His heart was like falling into an abyss of boundless darkness in the weightless chaos, lost in his own state of mind. Tony stayed in the air for a long time, he kept staring at the falling figure of the Iron Overlord. 20 seconds, the Iron Overlord fell on the Hudson River. The heavy mecha was like an iron meteorite, and it fell on the surface of the river and caused a splash of several hundred meters. Falling off the water at a height of 5,000 meters is no different from falling on a concrete floor. The huge impact force will directly disintegrate the mecha, and as for the Abidia inside, it may turn into a pile of powder. Tony thought about it for a long, long time. Fused with the original memories, in fact, he has always trusted and respected Abidia, and Abidia has always behaved like a gentle and generous elder. Obadiah is a loyal and reliable partner who runs Stark Industries together. There is a common goal and vision in the industry. Stark Industries has indeed relied on his talent and decision-making to get to where it is now. When the kidnapping happens, Tony also realizes that Abidia is not the loyal partner he once thought he was, but a complete villain, an unscrupulous careerist, and it is pleasant to be a companion and painful to be an opponent of him. From secretly finding a kidnapper to kidnap him to death, to killing the killer with just a slight temptation today. Tony knows that Abidia is the kind of crazy gambler who can do anything for his goal as long as the conditions are sufficient. It's over, it's finally over. Next, you can upgrade with peace of mind. If you have a system, you will definitely be able to escape the fate of the original show. When Tony returns to the Stark Tower, the site in front of the building is in ruins, covered in scars and wreckage. The destructive power of the previous two people was too amazing. There were already a lot of people gathered outside the building, including Pepper, Colonel Rhodes, Agent Phil Coulson, company employees, police officers, and the FBI. The scene in front of them made everyone's hearts palpitate, as if some giant beast was destroying it to its heart's content. There were broken things everywhere, although it had been quiet for a long time, but the suffocating momentum lingered. Tony was a little glad that most of their battles were at high altitude, but luckily there were no casualties on the ground. Dealing with follow-up is a hassle. First of all, you can't let others know that you did it. If you want to develop quietly, the most important thing is to survive. Just develop obscenely, and those who come out to make waves will definitely be targeted by all forces. Appointed Pepper as CEO of Stark Industries. What he needs most now is quiet upgrade gear, so try to keep a low profile. And then the defense agency will definitely be eyeing the mecha after it finds out. If you want to gag their mouths, you can only throw the Iron Overlord out. Anyway, the level of the generation, it is not distressing to throw it out, but the arc reactor must be kept in his hands. How to solve the energy problem, it is none of his business. Unbeknownst to Tony, the day after he handed over the design of the Iron Overlord to the defense agency, the drawings were in the hands of Justin Hammer Industries, a sworn rival of Stark Industries. There is also the fishing of Abidia, and the Iron Overlord mecha. After all, he is the veteran of the company, so he can't be in the river. Even if he finishes feeding the fish, isn't there still a bone, and he got it out and buried it. Tony flew directly into the building in a driver of Mark III, called Pepper and Colonel Rod, and explained the whole thing clearly, and he left the rest to them. No matter how surprised they were, they just ran away. Flying back to the seaside villa in Malibu, California, and unloading the mech, Tony looked at the scars on the mecha and fell into deep thought. It seems that the mecha is still not advanced enough, and the demon-modified version of the Iron Overlord can only be 5 or 5 open. The body size, the two are very different. Mark is 3 or 2 meters tall, and the Iron Overlord is 10 meters high. The two are not the same type of mecha at all. Tony suddenly remembered the anti-Hulk mecha, or the Iron Overlord can be used in this kind of place, and when encountering giant enemies in the future, this mecha can be used. Speed. The difference between the two is also quite large. The Iron Overlord is heavy, the movement speed is slow, the flexibility is almost none, and it is also a live target. Mark III is too flexible and more suitable for himself. In terms of strength, in fact, the two mecha are almost the same, but the difference in weight is too much, so they will be blown away by the Iron Overlord punch. Attack. This Iron Overlord does much better than himself. Abidia made the Iron Overlord for war, so there are many more means of attack. Gatling guns, 6-shot missiles, anti-tank rockets, lasers. The Mark III only has miniature missiles, pulse attacks, and cluster guns. Basically powerless to deal with the Iron Overlord with an excessively thick carapace. Defense. The two are on par. It belongs to the situation that you can't beat me, and I can't beat you. To sum up, the Iron Overlord is a failed product that has understood the wrong design direction, and it is more like a war machine on the ground. Will the Iron Overlord be the mecha you want? Tony shook his head. The Iron Overlord is definitely not an ideal mecha. It has a lot of strength and strong defense, but it is slow. Whether it is flight speed or attack speed, it is slow. The world's martial arts are invincible, and only fast is not broken. Slowness is the original sin. So the mecha still has to be fast, of course, the strength must be strong, and the defense must also be there. Headache. It seems that it is better to make a few more sets, and make more mecha of different types and different emphases. There is still a long way to go. Tony thought a lot about it, and also determined the next way to go. The first must be to upgrade the arc reactor. The clues have been given in the original play, in the model designed by his chief dad, the architectural plan model of Stark Industrial Park. This architectural model is actually a model of the new elements. It is a prerequisite for the new elemental arc reactor, and the new third-generation reactor not only solves palladium poisoning, but also absorbs Thor's lightning. The second is the update and iteration of the mecha, and the current mecha is still too low. Tony remembered the anti-Hulk armor. the Desperate Armor, the Bloodside Armor, the Anti-Thor Armor, the Sword Armor in the Stone, the Supreme Warlock Armor, and the Anti-Sky Armor in the major parallel universes. Well, tears of longing welled up in Tony's mouth. These mecha must have to find a way to build, and with the blessing of the system, the upgraded mecha will definitely be amazing. Like in the original anti-Hulk Warframe, you can only open 5 or 5 with the Hulk, not to mention pressing the Hulk to rub it in place after upgrading, but it can definitely hammer the Hulk into a crazy escape. For example, the Anti-Thor Battle Armor, the strength of the parallel universe Thor skyrocketed after the blackening. Tony used a piece of Asgard crystal given to him by Thor before to make the Anti-Thor Battle Armor as the core, and in the end, he still didn't fight Thor and was demolished. If the system is upgraded once, then the result will definitely be reversed, and the Anti-Thor armor can hammer the tyrant blackened Thor out of. And all kinds of. The world will be very different because of the system. Nothing was said all night. The next day, Tony went to the Stark Industries Board of Directors meeting, and determined the direction of development of Stark Industries, which completely stopped selling weapons and began to develop in clean energy, medical agriculture. Although Stark Industries' arms sales are the bulk of corporate profits, this profit smells of blood, and Tony is not at ease with it. Besides, his assets are enough for him to live 10 lifetimes. No matter how much money there is, it is a string of numbers, which is meaningless to him. With the arc reactor, global energy freedom can be fully realized, although it will not really be all free, but even if it is symbolically collected, the global accumulation is an astronomical amount. And officially appointed Pepper as the CEO of Stark Industries. Although some small shareholders strongly opposed, Tony as a director has the greatest executive power, and the final result is no suspense. I also attended a number of press conferences to explain that yesterday's incident was caused by the failure of a robot prototype, which led to an accident on site. Company veteran Obadiah Stan, tragically killed. The real situation must not be told to the public. The company's directors and veterans are infighting, and everyone is not good looking when they say it, which can be regarded as giving Obadiah a decent face. In the evening, he also rejected the invitation of the Territorial Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Bureau to join him, and he was uninhibited and freedom-loving, and he could not stand the militarized management style of S.H.I.E.L.D. Another reason is that S.H.I.E.L.D.'s philosophy is not in line with his own, and now S.H.I.E.L.D. Director Nick Fury is unscrupulous in order to achieve the end. He also said that he was an absolute institution of justice, that justice was a yarn, and that unscrupulous means were definitely the means of villains. Again, S.H.I.E.L.D. has been infiltrated like a sieve by Hydra, and the Supreme Leader, Alexander Pierce, is both the Supreme Leader of S.H.I.E.L.D. and a member of Hydra. At this time, go in, and rush to send equipment to Hydra. Therefore, the important task of guarding the world's peace and tranquility should be done by yourself, and the Territorial Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Bureau is too much to treat itself as a dish. Unbeknownst to Tony, Hydra had already begun to reach out to him, such as the previous Abidio and Stark Industries nemesis, Hammer. On the top floor of the Hammer Group building, in front of the huge floor-to-ceiling glass window, Hammer has a lollipop in his mouth, looking at the sign of the Stark building in the distance, glittering in the curtain. Hammer picked up the materials on the table, which was the blueprint he had obtained from Senator Stern for a generation of Warframe Iron Overlords. It has been handed over to the company's engineers for a week of research, and the mecha has been produced, but the energy problem has not been solved. The electric energy is not good, the battery life is too poor, the gasoline is not good, the gasoline engine is small and the power is insufficient, and the big is too bloated. Solid fuel is also not good, not to mention expensive, it is also easy to explode. Nuclear energy has also been tried, but it can't do it, and it can't solve the problem of miniaturization. It's all a bunch of rubbish. Hammer frantically threw the lollipop from his mouth. Unbeknownst to him, these problems had all been encountered by Obadiah. And then he had exactly the same idea as Obadiah at the moment, just wanted to get a miniaturized arc reactor from Tony. Tony's crumb, how the hell did you get the little reactor? Hammer also had to admire the technology of his nemesis Tony. The arc reactor and mecha are standard, and it is not good to change them to other energy sources. At this time, the office door opened, and it was his assistant Jack who entered. Sir, the information has been found. Jack placed a stack of materials on the table, which Hammer had asked him to look up about Stark Corporation's history of energy. In particular, the ARC project in it was investigated one by one, and it was found that only one of the participants was still alive, named Anton Vanke. Anton participates in the ARC project with Tony's father, Howard Ward. Later in the ARC project, Anton was unfairly treated by Howard and exiled to Siberia. Then Anton's son, Anton Vanke, was also a nuclear physics scientist. Maybe you can bring them over and try it. When Hammer saw this, he already had a plan in his heart. Hammer picked up his pen and wrote a few words on the paper. Iron Destiny Plan. Tony, your fate is to fall. Don't blame me for being ruthless. Stark Industries will only collapse if you die. The corners of Hammer's mouth curled slightly, and he took out a lollipop again, and began to fantasize in his heart that after the collapse of Stark Industries, Hammer would take over all the orders for weapons and mechs. As soon as he looked excited, the A4 paper in his left hand turned to ashes. Hammer calmed down and made a phone call, with a respectful attitude. Yes, Mr. Stern, everything is planned. Stern's cold voice rang out from the phone. Not fast enough, maybe, I can get you a help. Quote. At this time, Ivan Vanke was building the arc reactor at home. The reason is that his father, Anton Vanke, was watching Tony's press conference, and he watched the arc reactor he developed was actually used for green energy after being perfected by Tony, which could be used for unlimited weapons, but it was used by Stark Industries to improve people's livelihood and create evil. Moreover, Stark Industries clearly has half of its own. Anton Vanke was indignant for a while, and died of cerebral thrombosis in excess of excitement. Ivan Vanke saw his father die depressed, and after listening to his father tell the reason, he held a grudge against Tony, and what was the best way to make a person miserable? It's to beat him in what he does best. So, Ivan dug through his father's relics and found the design of the ARC's arc reactor. And in the signature of the design, it was written, Howard Stark and Anton Vanke. Ivan looked at this signature for a long time, and his eyes gradually became cold. This is an honor that belongs to my father, and I will definitely take it back with my own hands. Quote. Ivan is also a genius, studied for a while, and he actually came up with a miniaturization solution. When the palladium element is cold nuclear fusion, use the counterenergy to obtain energy through the ion plasma pipeline. This day he holds a toothpick, is in the final test of the arc reactor. Open the palladium element filling pipe. The palladium element meanders like a snake into the reactor, turn on the power supply, start the electromagnetic circle, and the power reaches its peak in an instant. With a snap, all the smoke and incandescent lamps in the studio exploded, and the studio suddenly became pitch black. Only the blue glow of the ion stream of the arc reactor in front of him gradually brightened. Ivan looked at the arc reactor in front of him, as if he saw Tony Stark kneeling and begging for mercy. He opened his mouth wide with joy and laughed. Just as he was happy, the door of the studio was blown open from the outside, and the door panel flew out and hit the wall, shattering. A group of masked black-clothed men, armed with firearms, rushed in, and controlled Ivan without saying a word. Ivan wanted to resist, but his fists were invincible to his 4 hands, and he was quickly tied to death. A hood was put on Ivan's head, and then he felt himself being dragged out of the house, dragged into the car started, and then on the plane. The plane flew for a long time, and Ivan was kept on a trap. His eyes couldn't see anything, and he could only rely on listening to the sound to discern who the other party was and where he was going to take him. During this period, he thought a lot. At first he thought that the other party was someone from the Mauzi government, but it was wrong to think about it. If the government was looking for him, he would not have to cover his head at all. Then he thought that it might be Tony's person, and then denied it. First of all, Tony didn't know that he existed, and he didn't know that he was working on the arc reactor, so there was no reason to deal with him. The plane flew for a long time, about 10 hours in Ivan's feelings. And finally when he was about to starve to death, he landed. Ivan was taken off the plane, walked about 50 meters, his hood was finally taken off. The bright light in front of his eyes made his eyes stinging for more than 10 hours. Ivan blocked the light with his hand, and it took a while to get used to the environment around him. It was an aircraft warehouse with a luxurious fighter jet, and not far in front of the plane was a white cloth dining table with flowers and goblets. At the dining table sat a middle-aged man in a suit and a napkin. That's when I heard the man say, "Hey, he's coming." The man stood up, looked at Ivan and said happily, "How happy, welcome." Ivan didn't know this person, but seeing that his attitude was not bad, he was relieved, at least not shouting and killing as soon as they met. When Ivan was brought to the table, the man behaved amiably again. "Oh my god, hurry up and unhandcuff my friend, please forgive me, I'm sorry." Ivan was confused in his heart. He didn't know who this person was, but he thought he was a person with great energy. The kidnappers were willing to obey his commands. The man continued, "I am your most loyal friend, and I didn't see that we would meet in such a situation." When the kidnappers had withdrawn, the man began to introduce himself. "My name is Justin Hammer." Ivan couldn't figure out what was going on, so he remained silent and reached out to shake Hammer's hand. Hammer also knew that Ivan was too wary now, and continued, "I want to make a deal with you. Have a seat." Quote. Hammer didn't talk nonsense, and directly stated his purpose. "You and I are similar in many ways, for example, we have a common enemy, Tony Stark." Quote. Hammer had investigated Ivan and knew his background, but he didn't know what Ivan's relationship with Tony was like, or if he tried it first. Ivan understood that the person in front of him could really be an ally. Hammer continued, "The only difference between us is that I have a lot of resources, and you have a lot of technology, and I feel like we can work together and push the Tony Stark guy into hell." Ivan relieved himself and even began to be ecstatic, grinning, "If someone wants to kill me, please don't wake me up, okay?" Still unsure, Hammer continued to speculate, "You're very subtle, but do you understand what I just said?" Ivan nodded and smiled, "Understood, man." This is also what he dreamed of, although he didn't know what Hammer's plans were, but as long as he could do it against Tony Stark, it was something he couldn't ask for. Hammer was also overjoyed. "Okay, come, have a toast, and have a good time working together." I knew in my heart that this person had an enmity with Tony, and he could finally use it for himself, and he was a big step closer to the day when the Iron Destiny plan was completed. After a full meal, the two began to call each other brothers. The next day, Hammer took Ivan to Hammer's R&D department. The R&D department is very spacious, with a dazzling array of tools and neatly organized, but strangely, there is an F-22 fighter jet inside, which seems to be the one from last night, and Ivan thinks it is a special habit of rich people. Hammer introduced Ivan, "This is my development base, and you can focus on design here. The kind of game that can play the dead, you can have a lot of fun, no pressure." Hammer was a pun. "Look at this, it's really exciting, the mecha designed by our company, they all have amazing combat effectiveness." A group of people walked to the mecha assembly area and looked at the imitation of the Iron Overlord in front of them, which had been specially optimized, and its body was much more slender than the Iron Overlord, and the 5-meter-tall mecha had a great visual impact. The mecha style is tough and angular, and at first glance it is a cold-blooded war killer. Rows of mechs are neatly arranged, with wires attached to them, and it is obvious that the energy problem has not been solved. "Come and have a visit." Hammer stood aside. Ivan looked at the mecha in front of him. It was much better than he had imagined at the beginning, worthy of a large company. A group of people walked to the side of the plane. Ivan didn't care, he kept looking at the mecha. Hammer was facing the fighter jet, and said to Ivan mysteriously, "Come, brother, I will introduce you to a mysterious and powerful friend." With a respectful face, Hammer shouted at the plane, "Mr. Red Spider." Ivan was horrified to find that the fighter in front of him was actually disintegrating. No, in the complicated changes, in the click, the parts of the fighter were staggered, rolling, folding in half, dazzling. This terrifying picture made Ivan's nerves almost collapse. He knelt on the ground, his eyes stared blankly ahead. The fighter finally completed the transformation, and a majestic robot stood in front of him. It was the Decepticon Red Spider. Hammer sighed again. This is really a godlike creation, so advanced and complex, it is really beyond the limits of human imagination. The Red Spider is the mysterious help sent by Senator Stern to assist him. In Stern's plan, Hammer Industries is responsible for producing mechas, Ivan is responsible for solving the Arc engine, and Red Spider is responsible for optimizing the armor. For Cybertrons, designing a new armor is as simple as breathing. But in order to increase production, it can't be too complicated, and the cost must be controlled. Ivan finally relented, but his body was still a little weak, and he felt very small in the face of a fierce-looking, tall and powerful mechanical body. Hammer was pleased with Ivan's performance. The voice of the Red Spider machine sounded, "Welcome, Mr. Ivan Vanke. I hope that you can solve the energy problem of the mecha in the next design." Quote. Although the Red Spider doesn't like to deal with Earthlings very much, in his eyes, the so-called mecha is not even as good as shit, and the thing that will be destroyed with one punch, what is there to design? But in order to rescue Megatron, he has to cooperate with humans. In fact, he can also do the nuclear reactor of the mecha, but it consumes the energy of the fire, which is completely unnecessary, and he will not mention it. As you wish. Although Ivan is arrogant, he also knows that he must be in awe of the unknown. Ivan took a closer look at the design and parameters of the mecha that had been optimized by the Red Spider, and he already had an idea. Ivan looked at the mechs, turned to Hammer and asked, "What do you want to do with them?" Hansmer thought for a moment. "My long-term goal is to strengthen my influence in the hexagon over the next 25 years. Seeing that Ivan pouted when he heard this, he knew that he didn't want to hear this, so he said, "Most importantly, I want to make Stark Industries history." Hammer's eyes were cold. "Next I'm going to the Stark Fair and I want to on Tony's head. Do you understand what I mean?" Ivan was really happy to hear this. This brother really thought of it with himself, and laughed. "I don't think this is a problem." Quote. Hammer is also very happy. The two are like-minded and have the ability to do it, which is really good. Next, Ivan was in the R&D department of Hammer Company, and began the road of reactor production and mecha transformation, and the cooperation between the two was very pleasant for the common goal. The arc reactor was also rebuilt here, and the R&D studio of Hammer was much better than Ivan's original small studio, and Ivan's rebuilt arc reactor was much stronger than his first prototype, and the output power was 3 times that of the prototype. But he had optimized it to the extreme, and this power could not be increased. The new arc reactor can output up to 3 billion joules per second, which translates to 3 million kilowatts, while the Boeing 747 is about 200,000 kilowatts when flying at full speed, which is equivalent to the power of 15 Boeing 747s, which is simply incredible energy. Ivan was already quite satisfied, and he had never dared to think about the power of the new engine before. Roughly equivalent to Tony's generation of arcs in the kidnapper's cave. Hammer and Ivan are frantically preparing. They have prepared a full 100 mechas, because they can't find a pilot. Ivan also wrote an unmanned control system, which can remotely control the mecha and transform it into a drone mecha. It's weird that, as silicon-based people, Cybertrons can't remotely control drones. Hammer thought that if the Red Spider could control these drones, 1 + 1 would definitely be greater than the sum of its parts. Hammer installed a variety of weapons on the mecha, such as heavy machine guns, cannons, grenade launchers, missiles, lasers, which can be divided into 4 different types and can be used for different tactical coordination. The Air Force defense model is mainly used for medium and low altitude interception, pursuit of air targets and aerial reconnaissance. The Air Force offensive model will be equipped with lasers and short-range air-to-air missiles, ground defense models, MGL grenade launchers and surface-to-air missiles are installed. The ground offensive model focuses on attack, with twin rapid-fire machine guns on the wrist, rapid-fire machine guns on the back, and chain automatic cannons. The only flaw is that in order to reduce weight and cost, it has to use a lightweight alloy shell. Such a mecha will not be strong enough, and the output power of the second-generation Venki brand arc reactor is not high enough. In order to install as many weapons as possible, the defense can only be reduced. Ivan added a self-destruct function to the mech. He also made a special mecha for himself. Thinking about the powerful mecha, Ivan smiled gloomily, thinking that Tony was blasted to slag under his powerful mecha firepower. After watching the performance of the drone mecha, Hammer felt that it was no different from the real person, and was overjoyed, and named it the Intelligent Humanoid Combat Drone Corps of Hammer Military Industrial Enterprise, which was a big step forward from the success of the plan. Hammer also smiled grimly. Tony, are you ready to take it? In the past, orders for traditional weapons were robbed, and now orders for mecha are also being robbed. I see what you can do. Hammer had in mind that Stark Corporation had been bankrupted by him, and that it would be best if Tony would kneel in front of him and beg for mercy. The two have their own ghosts, but their goals are the same. Only the Red Spider is not aligned with their goal, and the Red Spider's biggest goal now is to find Megatron. Although he knew that Megatron was in the hands of humans, he didn't know where it was hidden. Tony didn't know that under the arrangement of Hydra, the tentacles of the conspiracy were reaching for him, and he was escalating wildly at this time. In an underground studio at a seaside villa in Malibu, California, Tony is contemplating a new elemental reactor. After the first generation of Arc Engine was upgraded by the system, the problem of palladium metal poisoning has not been solved. He has tested the concentration of palladium in the blood in the past few days, and sure enough, it is increasing every day. According to the current palladium increase rate, he will not live for half a year. To solve the problem of palladium poisoning, new elements of palladium substitutes must be developed. Poisoning is one direction, and on the other hand, the energy supply level of the first-generation engine is insufficient. Otherwise the junior small bosses like the Iron Overlord will be struggling, not to mention the big bosses they encounter later. They have the power to destroy the world in every move. If you don't upgrade the energy engine, I'm afraid you won't survive 2 episodes. So it was imperative to upgrade the engine. To build a new engine, you have to get new elements out first. Tony knows that the secret of the new element is hidden in the model of the Stark Industrial Park that his father designed for him, and tells him that it is the key to the future. The new element is the knowledge he learned from his father's participation in a Pegasus project, which is related to the Rubik's Cube of the universe. It seems that the new elemental arc reactor has a lot to do with the cosmic Rubik's Cube. In the early stage when you can't find Infinity Stones, it is best to get some energy related to Infinity Stones. Events are done step by step, starting with finding a new element structure. Jarvis. Stand by, sir. Scan all the buildings in Stark Park. Scan complete. Suddenly, the top view of Stark Industrial Park was displayed. In front of him, and the model of the Earth in the center of the park was in front of him, and he marked the model of the Earth with his finger. This should be the nucleus, Jarvis. The globe zooms in, highlighted. The model of the Earth brightens, zooms in. Get rid of all the roads. All of a sudden, the graphics in the projection are much fresher. What are you looking for, sir? Jarvis burned a bit of a CPU and had to ask Tony about Tony's request first. Jarvis, does this look like a new element? The Jarvis CPU started heating up and the fan started banging. All greenery, shrubs, trees, meadows, all removed. The projection is clearer, and some of the information hidden in the design can already be seen, because the things left on the projection are too regular. Parking spaces, exit entrances, all removed. There wasn't much left on the projection, it was more concise, they were laid out at odd angles, and there seemed to be no parallel connection, but Tony was vaguely aware of the pattern contained in them. Using the pavilion as a framework to build wireframe models of neutrons and protons. The data in the projection is dazzling. Soon the structure of a new element was shown in front of the eyes, a special combination of atomic number and atomic mass. Tony's arms are one, the projection of the new element structure is magnified several times, and Tony is at the nucleus, looking at the regular electron cloud around him, and he feels something. The structure of this new element is ingenious, like a palace in a microcosm. Its nucleus is strong and powerful, like an impregnable fortress that protects the microscopic particles inside. Around the nucleus, clouds of electrons surround it, like nimble dancers, sometimes dancing, sometimes quiet as water, which together form the wonderful structure of this element. The microscopic particles move in an orderly manner inside the elements, and they are in perfect harmony with each other, like a symphony orchestra. The protons and neutrons in the nucleus of the atom are intertwined to form a harmonious equilibrium that gives the element its stable properties. The structure of this new element is like a masterpiece of nature's wisdom, full of mystery and mystery. Definitely a new element. The extracted element should be a viable substitute for palladium. Jarvis reminded Tony after the calculations. Tony was excited, not only happy, but also looking forward to seeing the hunt. It's like the feeling of a top student encountering a new exam question. I had a good father in front of me, and the old man is really powerful. He sighed slightly. This was Tony's last gift left to him by his father. He doesn't feel much for Tony's father, but he also deeply feels the deep fatherly love, although this fatherly love is for the previous life, but he empathizes. I thank you for him, Daddy. Next, let's think about how to make this element. Unfortunately, it can't be synthesized. Jarvis poured cold water just in time. If you can't synthesize, then use similar elements and bombard them with hadrons, which will require a particle accelerator. Tony feels like a layer by layer. If you want to solve A, you need B. If you want to get B, you need C. If you can't do it, just pit it, just solve the problem. Just do it. Tony is ready to go on a big construction spree. Ready for a major makeover. Jarvis, we're back in builder mode. Tony starts to get excited, and he's rediscovering the same feeling he had when he had overcome the odds. The studio was too small, and the wall panels were torn down. Are the energy supply wires too thin? Holes in the ceiling to pull wires. Over the next few days, the studio was torn apart by Tony. The entire wall was knocked through several large holes, several thick coils were passed through it. And the good ceiling was drilled with a large hole, and a few thick wires hung down from it. The parts made in the machining workshop were assembled one by one with the help of tools and robotic arms, and Jarvis was a great help. The black waist thick coils are one after the other, forming a ring, a small ring hadron accelerator. Enough for Tony to accomplish his goal. Finally, after half a month of hard work, the small ring hadron accelerator was finally completed. And Tony looked at the huge electromagnetic coil that crossed several walls in the studio, like a giant dragon lying there. And his dark body was full of mystery and power, as if he was about to take off. The triangular UO metal target prepared in advance has been fixed, and now it is only time to power up the hadron accelerator. This is the final step, where Tony places the scintillator in the middle of the coil and uses it to deflect the hadron ray, which bombards the UO metal target on the side. Then you can get the new elements you want. Tony, tired for days, was full of anticipation, and at the moment he had a sense of anticipation that he was about to solve one of the most difficult exam questions. He threw a piece of lead metal into the shredder, and after the Jarvis plan, bombarded the UO atoms with lead atoms, which was the best solution. Jarvis, start the prism accelerator. Initiated. With a buzz, the particle accelerator was activated, the light in the studio dimmed significantly, and all the electricity was supplied to the particle accelerator, and the voltage was insufficient in other places. I saw that the acceleration coil began to vibrate slightly, which was slowly accelerating the lead atoms, running in the electromagnetic coil one by one, until accelerating to the speed of light. The buzzing sound became louder and louder, and the lead atoms in the coil began to glow, the overall white light, and then the white light occasionally flashed blue, purple and red. Like a spine composed of light, it runs through the entire particle accelerator, beating like a pulse, dazzling to the extreme. Thanks for watching.